It's time to take a ride on the Steelers Afternoon Drive with our co-hosts, Alan Saunders and Zachary Smith.
Welcome back to another episode of Steelers Afternoon Drive. I'm Zachary Smith. That is Alan Saunders. Alan, how are we feeling?
I'm good, man. How are you?
I'm good, other than I just realized that because of having DB on Friday, I never switched this back. Bam! There's the turf in the background. Didn't have it going right at first, but yeah, we're good.
I feel like the reveal. It's
Yeah, we could pretend that I purposefully did that. Maybe I shouldn't have said anything. I just did it. But anyways, here to talk ball. Alan, we have not talked about the game against the Bengals at all. So we're going to dive into that. There's honestly too much stuff to talk about. So there's stuff that we're probably not going to get to today that I can't wait to talk about. We're going to have to save it for tomorrow, though. Stuff from Tomlin today, obviously. We got a couple questions. One from our guy, Steve, who's so generous. Every time he asks a question, he's sending us money. Which you don't have to do, Steve, to ask a question, but we certainly appreciate it overall.
You know what it is? I think Steven just can't bring himself to compliment us. So, you know, it was said, if you want to talk about how smart or how attractive we are,
that's
or
true,
how, or you could just send money if you can't stoop to that level of lying.
He's like sitting there, like his teeth are mashing, and he's just like, oh, no, backspace. Let me just send him money instead. No, and I really like the imagery behind that. But anyways, let's talk about some of this stuff. Alan, the main thing that I want to discuss here, and you brought this up to me basically right before we started recording, came from, Mike Tomlin talked about it today, but even Jerry Dulac wrote about this yesterday, was kind of about the Steelers changing their offensive game plan this week against Cincinnati from what obviously worked so well for them in the first matchup, where they were just moving the ball at will, scoring at will. And then you see how Saturday night goes, and it felt like something had to give. Certainly weather played a part, and I know Cincinnati's defense had been playing a little bit better, but it certainly didn't look like it was the same plan of attack. And then for that to kind of be corroborated over the past 48 hours as well, what do you make of that? What's to give there?
Man, to me, this is pretty damning stuff here. So I guess the gist of what Jerry wrote on I guess it was Sunday, was that the Steelers just totally decided that they were going to change their game plan from the first game in Cincinnati. And look, when you're playing a divisional opponent twice in the season, I think sometimes that's healthy, even if you had success the first time. And so I don't think like that idea in of itself is like, oh, it worked, so you have to do the same thing. No, I don't agree with that. But and they wanted to run the ball. They felt like Cincinnati's defense had improved since the last time they played them. They felt like the conditions were going to be an issue. And they wanted to establish the run. They wanted to, I think Jerry wrote, they wanted to run it 30, 40 times. They ended up running it 26. They ended up averaging 4.2 yards a carry, but it was in the first game. And then the second game, so that was their numbers from the time in Cincinnati. Now this time with the focus on running the football, they ran at 23 for 3.2. So like it didn't work. They weren't able to possess the ball. They weren't able to put together drives. And it really felt like they were kind of just beating their heads against the wall for most of the game. And to find out it was kind of intentional, I didn't like the play calling as it was happening. And I certainly, this resolves a lot of it for me. But this feels like sort of like the coaching staff let the players down here to me. What's your takeaway from hearing this?
The exact same, because to be honest with you, I understand the idea of wanting to, like, having an idea going into a game. The more concerning part about it to me is when you see that it's not working in the course of a game, them not kind of going away from that and adjusting. Like the lack of adjustments that were made in game is the more concerning part about it to me. But yeah, I absolutely agree that this just feels like maybe doing a little bit too much from the coaching staff, maybe thinking too hard about it. Like, this is obviously what they've wanted the identity to be, but if you're not good at it, I'm not saying completely go away from it or anything like that. But again, throughout the course of a game, I think that you got to be able to let the flow of a game dictate the way things are going to go and be able to change things up. And clearly they were not able to do so or didn't care to try to do so. I don't know. But that's, like you said, I think damning is probably the best word to describe it.
Well, they did eventually, right? I mean, they did eventually get to some hurry up, but it just took a long time. And they did, they did have a good drive on, what was it, their second drive of the game, where they went down and scored. Najee Harris had the touchdown run after.
Oh yeah, they had a couple defensive penalties.
Yeah, after the Darnell Washington drew DPI. Drew maybe the Steelers were awarded DPI in the end zone. If we're being real fair with the way we word that, I didn't like that call. But
it was one of the penalties called of all time. Yeah.
Yeah. I thought that was a good drive. Yes, it had some defensive penalty assist, but it did have some nice runs. I remember Najee very specifically had a couple of nice long runs on that drive. And it seemed like they were kind of doing on that drive what they were trying to do. But they still just got into, on that drive, there was that long 3rd and 11 where they throw the pass to Mike Williams. That's not a high percentage play. Like you can't live on getting to 3rd and 11 and then throwing jump balls to Mike Williams. I'm not sure they got into another 3rd and long on the rest of that drive, but it felt like they were 3rd and long the entire game. Like I just, I don't know. It's one thing to say, okay, we can't just hit the ditto marks and do exactly what we did last time, but it's very clear that the Steelers made changes to their offensive game plan against the Bengals, and the results got worse. Like and to me, that's exactly what you can't do as a coaching staff.
So what was, I said that, after Jerry wrote this, people could, believe it or disbelieve it. But then you hear Mike Tomlin kind of confirm that. What did he have to say about it in the follow-up?
Yeah, he basically said, like, we had an agenda in this game that they wanted to, they wanted to run the ball, and they wanted to, credit to Mike Tomlin, because I think he was very transparent, but he said, here's the quote: "We formulate plans to try to position ourselves to control the game, and sometimes it might be minimizing our exposure to Joe Burrow with how we play offensively." And to me, it's like, not only like do I think this is the wrong idea in general, but like, man, the Steelers defense should not. The Steelers should feel better about their defense than that. That they should feel like. I know that they gave up what? They gave up 30. What was it, 32 in the first game? 34?
I think it was 44, 38.
38, yeah, 30. Yeah. So they certainly didn't play well last time out against Cincinnati. But I just feel like this defense, you have the most expensive defense in the league. This is kind of what I talked about on Morning Rush this morning. Like, this defense should be able to be leading the Steelers to victory, not a unit that needs the other side of the ball to change, and in this case, lessen what it's doing in order to protect that unit. Like, I don't know. How do you feel? How do you say you have one of the best defenses in the league if you have to tell your offense you have to run the ball to protect the defense? Like that shouldn't be the theory of how these Steelers are organized. I don't like any of that.
And I want to talk about the defense, but I think the other person that, saying a quote like that is telling me that they're protecting is a 36-year-old Russell Wilson that's won a Super Bowl that you feel like you should be able to count on, right? Like, if you're taking the ball out of his hands, I think it kind of shows like a lack of confidence if that's what your offensive game plan became. I understand the elements, of course, but like,
I pushed Tomlin on not in specifically the Bengals game, but in general. The Steelers were 4th in carries this year. They're like tied for 21st in yards per carry. It's a big group that's tied at 4.1, so it's like 21st all the way down to 25th or something like that. Success rate is down in the bottom 5, I think. EPA per play, I know coming into week 18 it was down around 28 or something like that when running the ball. Clearly very inefficient running offense, and yet one of the teams that ran the ball the very most in the NFL this season. And it's not like they were spending a lot of time milking big leads either. Like, and he, I asked, like, why do you want that to be such a big part of your identity? And he said a component of possessing the ball is not only time, but managing risk. And obviously there's less risk with running the football than throwing it. And sometimes that's a component of the discussion. I understand that the Steelers want to be they want to be a team. This is fundamental to like the identity of the Pittsburgh Steelers. They want to run the ball and play good defense. Like, that's who they are. But you don't have to be 4th in the league in carries. Like, you can. I don't know. I think that was.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Do you think that the last I like that's a season long stat. Like they've been wanting
Yeah.
to run the football obviously all season long. But do you think
And it
because the
goes, hold on,
turnover
before it even goes beyond, like you hire Arthur Smith because you want to run the ball, right? So
yeah.
it like goes way back beyond that, but keep going.
Well, I was just saying, like the mitigation of the turnover part of that. We've heard Tomlin say that for years, but like I just wonder if the last 3 weeks, with the way that Russell had turned the football over, had kind of even shifted that focus even more. Like I wonder if this would have been the approach if this game was placed maybe after that Cleveland game, as opposed to after this 3-game stretch that we just had.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of seems like the coaching staff has lost a little faith in Russ and not turning the ball over. And I mean, it's hard to say that they haven't earned that loss of faith. So
Yeah, I mean that thought literally just entered my mind now. Again, like I hadn't read that story. So you were kind of catching me up right before we started recording in terms of this happening. But yeah, man, that's I mean, like you said, that's coaching right there, letting the players down as opposed to the other way around. I wanted to speak to the defense side of that real quick because as frustrating as it was for me in the stadium on Saturday, watching the Bengals convert seemingly every. I know that they didn't convert every third down, but it certainly felt that way and moving the ball with ease. The Steelers did do what defenses have to do in today's modern NFL to win football games and holding Cincinnati to 3, other than the Jamar Chase touchdown to open up the game. 19 points for Cincinnati. You feel like, if you do that, you're going to have a good shot to win the football game. They certainly did have a shot to win the football game late in this one. What did you make of the defensive performance overall in this one? I know you said you talked about the defense on the morning rush not being dominant, but I thought they were good enough.
well, I think the morning rush was about really the season long numbers there. But
Right.
like I thought the defense was good enough to win the game. I thought they probably warmed up to it a little bit too slowly. And we've seen that happen a bunch this year where kind of first drive rocket. Like, how many times has that happened with the Steelers defense this year where the only the touchdown they gave up is on the first drive?
Yeah, or like very early, if not the first drive, like very
yeah,
early. Yeah.
it's happened multiple times. And so I know it happened in Atlanta, I'm pretty sure. I think it happened somewhere else too, where the Atlanta was a first drive was a field goal maybe. It's definitely been a thing where
Yeah.
they've had a couple of tough first drives, and obviously sometimes they've not recovered from that, like Kansas City, where it was just a tough first drive that turned into a tough day at the office overall. I liked the adjustments they made in the game. I still feel like they don't really. I mean, Corey Trice against Jamar Chase without help is probably a bad idea. There's still
I
just
was gonna
stuff.
ask about that, like, if
Yeah.
Tomlin was asked about that at all, because Corey Trice said he found out, like, in the stadium that he was starting that game, and then to not have any help, like, whether that's an on the field thing where he thought he did have inside help and then didn't, or, like, I was wondering if Tomlin was asked about specifically Corey Trice's matchup or anything, like,
Well,
the way
he
he
was
deployed.
not. He didn't have help on the touchdown. There was other plays where he did. I just didn't think he had enough help. I thought I thought they gave Dante Jackson more help the first time around than I saw Corey in one. Now Corey Trice is a better man-to-man cover technician than Dante Jackson. This is not really Jackson's game, but like I saw Corey Trice in more one-on-one coverage with Chase this game than I saw Jackson with the first time around, I think. And so like I haven't rewatched the game, but like that was my impression from watching it live. That's surprising to me. But I don't. Part of the problem is I think they were having like Burrow was getting rid of the ball very quickly. So because Trice wasn't having help, he was in bail. It's really hard to cover 0 to 5 yard routes when you're in bail technique. Like you're just not going to be able to do it. The wide receiver is going to stop and you're going to have your momentum going backwards and it's going to be completed. I thought they needed to make an overall adjustment to the fact that Burrow was getting rid of the ball so fast. That included changing the way they were covering receivers, but it also included defensive linemen getting their hands up, which turned out to be a big thing for Cam Hayward in the game, and working to get some interior pressure. They blitzed Patrick Queen a whole bunch in this one. And he got home and got a forced fumble.
Yeah.
And so I think there's I think they made really good adjustments in the game, and I think overall it's a good performance. It just stings to start the game out the way they did and put the offense that's already struggling kind of behind the eight ball from the beginning. I didn't think at any point in this game that they played good complementary football. It just did not seem like they ever had even really two units pulling at the same time, let alone all three.
And we talked about, I don't want to spend too much time on this again, that third phase, but the special teams I mentioned with Jermaine Burton out, like I thought that was going to change the Bengals in terms of their ability to flip the field in the kickoff game, but a couple nice returns. Again, like I don't know that it's been talked about enough, probably flying under the radar, but the coverage units as of late from the Steelers have taken a little bit of a step back as well.
Yeah. Corliss Waitman dropped a punt snap, which they very narrowly avoided being catastrophic. Yeah, so yeah, I didn't think the special teams were. I mean, Calvin fumbled the punt, and they did get the big play back with Connor Hayward later, but it was just inconsistent. All of it was inconsistent.
Yeah, absolutely. Some of the defensive stuff, though, is actually where these questions come from. So I feel like it's a good time to work those in. One of them, like I said, our guy Steve here with the $10 super chat. So we appreciate that, Steve. If you don't want to compliment us, we'll certainly take your money. Said, well, also, I want to add context to this. Terrell Austin under contract for next season by all accounts, so potentially nothing to talk about here, but still a good thing to keep in mind. Steve said, would any top DC balk at the idea of coming to Pittsburgh anyway without having full control, knowing of Tomlin's presence and the fact that it's really him calling the shots?
Yeah, I don't actually know what Terrell Austin's contract situation is. I don't know.
I just saw in our group chat somebody threw it in there that he's under contract for next season, so that's what I was going based off of. But
okay,
maybe that's not the case.
Yeah, I haven't seen that, but I mean, it would make sense that it's up. A lot of times, coordinator contracts are 3 years, and this is his third season, so I don't really know. Okay. But I think the question is very valid. That like how attractive is the Steelers defensive coordinator position to top kind of candidates? And I think it came up in the discussion when we were talking about Brian Flores that like I think it really depends on the candidate. I think if you're someone who is a rising coach, that is a first-time defensive coordinator, it probably isn't a big deal. Like, let's say there's some like hot, position coach that Steelers want to poach from somebody or something like that. Like, I don't think that like you're never going to turn down that job the first time you get it. Right. So like, I think that would be fine. I also think it's fine for guys that are in the same situation as Terrell Austin, where defensive coordinator is kind of their ambition, right? Like, I don't think younger coaches that have already had exposure to the position or maybe even a higher position that are looking to get sort of back in the league's good graces, the bounce back candidate guy. I'm not sure how valuable it is to someone like that, someone like a Brian Flores. Because to me, like, I think the perception of Mike Tomlin around the NFL is already very high. The Steelers objectively have elite personnel. So like, how much credit can you really get for having a good season with the Steelers defense as a defensive coordinator when you have players that are probably better than someone else's that may be hiring used players? And Tomlin is there and will probably, I'm not saying he's doing anything to do this, but if I'm an NFL owner or another NFL head coach that's saying like, hey, why are the Steelers defense so good? Probably going to put a lot of stock into it being because of Mike Tomlin and not specifically because of his defensive coordinator. So I think that there are some places where it could be a very attractive position because Mike Tomlin is popular. And I think guys that especially like a person that like a Dick LeBeau, like Dick LeBeau's ambition when he came back to the Steelers was to be defensive coordinator. And he was a defensive coordinator with Mike Tomlin for a very long time. And he enjoyed that. They enjoyed great success together. Like, so, I mean, gosh, if you could replicate that hiring, that would be a slam dunk, even if like that's not necessarily the situation for everyone. But I do think there are guys out there where it just doesn't make a lot of sense.
So maybe like an older guy that obviously still a good coach, but probably past the date of a team wanting to attach the head coaching label to him. Like I know that like he wanted this specific scenario. But last year when Miami moved on from Vic Fangio, and it was clearly like he was going to go to Philly, like that is what he wanted for personal reasons, like maybe a situation like that.
Yeah, something like that. I mean, maybe a guy like Dennis Allen, who was like a pretty good defensive coordinator and was not a very good head coach at all.
Yeah, and he's had 2 stints now as a head coach as well. So yeah,
Right. And so like it seems like the head coach thing isn't going to happen for him, right? Like, and so like I just think maybe a guy like Jerod Mayo, who I think was put in a very, very bad position in New England, and I think is fairly similar to Flores without some of the baggage that he had when the Steelers brought Flores in.
Well, interesting that you say that, because I got a DM on Twitter today, and I wanted to bring this up on here. Seabass DM me and said, could Jerod Mayo fit the bill in terms of what you guys are talking about, and with adding a Brian Flores role type, being that we did not have one this past season after it was so successful in the prior one?
Yeah, I think that conversation opens up a lot when you're talking about that sort of secondary role, right? Where like that, whatever you want to call it, an analyst or a senior assistant or whatever, almost anybody is a good fit for that. I mean, I think specifically the Steelers should be looking at someone that comes from a front seven background, because TA's obviously,
Right.
Was the secondary coach, and so was Mike Tomlin. And so I think, when I think worked well when it was Keith Butler, a linebackers coach, with TA. I think it worked well with TA and Brian Flores. So I think someone like Mayo, who obviously played linebacker, and then was, I think he might have been inside linebackers coach in New England. But I mean, I think that could be an option. Yeah. And I think really, there are a lot, like, you're gonna be hard pressed to name a name that you're gonna come up with for that position and me say like that's not a good fit, unless I'm just gonna tell you like that guy's obviously gonna get a better job than that. like that's, I mean, Robert Saleh would be really good for that position. I think that guy's gonna get a better job than that. But like there are plenty of names that you could put in that hat and come up with a good fit.
I think the interesting context, or little bullet point to add there too, is the same thing that you said in terms of wanting a guy that has like the front seven experience to pair with TA, right? Because if it was somebody else that also kind of comes from the secondary background, I'm not saying that I would be opposed to having that person on the staff for an extra set of eyes and ears and fresh ideas or whatever. But it makes the pairing make more sense if it's somebody that brings something to the table that's not already on the staff.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that definitely is the way they've approached it in the past. So I would expect that to continue.
Yeah. The other coordinator I wanted to talk about as well, Artie Smith, getting some buzz today with the news that he's part of the Jets, looking at everybody. I actually got an email from Woody Johnson that they're interested in interviewing me. So we'll see how that goes, Alan. I'll keep you in the loop in terms of if I have to, make any arrangements. But the Chicago Bears as well listed there. And then this hasn't actually happened yet, but Jeremy Fowler said he wouldn't be surprised if the Jaguars took a look based off what their parameters are for what they're looking for in their next head coach. So Jets and Bears certainly with interest, taking a look there, and then potentially the Jags. What do we make of this? Because it seems like Steelers fans, as we know, they're certainly part of the 2/3 of the league, I think, that do not like their offensive coordinator. Are you surprised that he's getting some looks already, or what's your take on this?
No, I'm not surprised that he's getting looks. I think Arthur Smith is a pretty well-regarded guy around the league. I think he does his job really well. I don't think he's had a great year. I think he's probably still done better than I would have expected with the, sort of personnel the Steelers. I mean, like that. I think that's the reason that you look at what the Steelers have done offensively, and they end up right in the middle, 16th in scoring. And you look at the personnel and you say, 2 rookies and a 23-year-old second-year guy on the offensive line. Russell Wilson was pretty bad, in Denver, and not, is definitely not young. They really only have one playmaker, wide receiver. And you can kind of talk yourself into the personnel being the problem more than Arthur Smith, for the reason the Steelers weren't better than average on offense. I do think it is a little unusual for the offensive coordinator of the 16th ranked offense to be this sought out. So I'm not really surprised by it. I would be a little more surprised if something actually comes of it.
Yeah, I think that it's just, I mean, certainly with the Bears, to me, it'd be a weird hire with what they should be looking for in terms of, just getting Caleb Williams and stuff like that. Now, I don't know who they would pair him with in terms of like a QB coach or anything like that, but that would obviously, I think, become more important if Arthur Smith was the hire there. And the Jets, I don't mean, they're probably like resetting at that position, and who knows what that staff
I
would
think
look
the
like.
Jets
So
are like kind of a good fit for someone like Arthur Smith. They're going to want the Steelers approach. They're going to want, like, look at what they're having to work with. They have a really good defense. They have a good running back. They have a pretty good offensive line. They have some playmakers. They're probably not going to have much at quarterback. I think like that's the sort of recipe for what Arthur Smith has won with, right? And so I can really understand the Jets being motivated to pursue him. And while I'll say, like, I have a hard time thinking he would be the best candidate out there, I'm certainly not going to attempt to handicap what the Jets might do, because sort of seems like that's impossible. Like, I just they're a bit of an erratically run organization.
I mean, yeah, maybe Woody Johnson's son is like super impressed with what Arthur Smith's offense looks like on Madden. I don't know. I mean, maybe that is why this is coming to fruition here, where they're super interested in him. But I had people asking me as well, like, what do I think the fallout would be? Because it seems like Arthur Smith certainly would continue his Steelers tenure. They wouldn't, move on after one season. Like, if he ends up getting a head coach opportunity, so be it. And then the Steelers are looking for an OC again. The person was asking if my mind had shifted in terms of the way that the Steelers approach looking for coordinators, because Arthur Smith was a more high profile offensive coordinator than they had brought in the past. So do we think that they would, kind of go back to that well, or would it be like the what we had seen prior? Like, I don't think there's an internal candidate right now. So like, it's hard for me to even wrap my mind around where the Steelers would go if they were to lose Arthur Smith.
I mean, I think it'd be a lot of the same names we had last time around. I mean, obviously some of those guys are off the table now, but I mean, I think it would be the same idea. I think it'd be a lot of the same types of people, a lot of the same types of thought process about who you might want. I don't think there's an internal option that they would seriously consider. And I think they have, I don't see why they would go away from the process that they did last time. I think it would be very similar.
My scenario can't happen now because of Jim Irsay basically immediately coming out and saying that he's going to be back. But if we were to lose Arthur Smith and the Colts would have fired Shane Steichen, bring him in as OC, and then I'd have much more intrigue in bringing Justin Fields back than Russell Wilson at that point, just because of the types of quarterbacks that Shane Steichen has had success with. But it sounds like they are committed to 2025 with Shane Steichen.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's always a number of guys that you could see working out an offensive coordinator. It just feels like that market.
I just thought of something.
Okay, let's hear it.
I mentioned one of the teams that hasn't yet requested to interview him being the Jaguars. They fired Doug Peterson. Do you think he would potentially be a fit if Arthur Smith went elsewhere?
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I don't know if I really see that as a fit. But it's possible. Yeah.
Yeah. He just popped in my mind literally right now. Okay, I guess we can bring this up because this is going to be a quick thing. One other thing that was mentioned today, Alan, Mason McCormick breaking his hand. That happened in game then, I'm assuming, on Saturday?
Yes.
And do you think what's the fallout of that? Do we expect that he'll just, play with a cast on, or what's the fallout?
Yeah, I would expect he's going to try to play with a cast on. I don't know, like, I've never tried to play offensive line with a broken hand. I don't know how that's going to go. I have to talk to some people.
He hasn't been playing at the highest level without a cast on his hand. So, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I'll have to talk to some people about how realistic that is. See if I can get some info for us. But, yeah, tough dude to play through it.
Spencer Anderson, next man up if anything happens there where you can't go? Or
I would assume I can't imagine. I mean, I guess maybe you could play McCollum, but I would assume it'd be Spencer Anderson.
Yeah, that's where my mind goes first as well. All right. Anything else that you feel like we need to touch on today? I just want
Tomlin said Dante Jackson has a chance to play this week. Feels good. Obviously, that's going to sort of be incumbent on him getting through the week without again aggravating this back injury. So, like, that's one of those things where, like, how he feels now is completely irrelevant. We'll find out over the course of the week whether or not he's going to play.
And we'll talk about what his status is each day of the week leading up to, and also something to watch on the Baltimore side with Zay Flowers as well.
On Steelers afternoon Dante Jackson injury update.
There you go. All right, Alan.
Feels like it's been a talking point like a month straight now with this back that's been bothering him.
As the Dante Jackson turns.
All right.
The bold and the Dante. Whatever you want to call it. Anyways, tell the people they can find you.
At @Saunders_PGH on social media and SteelersNow.com. PGH Steelers Now is the site's account. Like, subscribe, hit that bell for notifications here on the YouTube channel. And that's it.
There we go. Leave us a 5-star review and subscribe if you're listening somewhere else. Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast from. You will find us there. Just search Steelers Afternoon Drive. Do the same thing on TikTok. And you'll find me everywhere. Zachary Smith, PGH, for Alan Saunders, and myself. Thanks for jumping in. Take another ride on the Steelers Afternoon Drive.